David, thank you for joining me slightly early today for this YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, DLive pre-show for our upcoming show that people will be able to enjoy today at noon Eastern on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. How are you, David?
I'm very well, Jason. Thank you. And I'm glad to be with you.
You know, one of the reasons we wanted to make the show earlier today is that we always have these social engineers who seem to be waiting for our broadcasts whenever they begin, and they, hit it with the thumbs down, which seems stupid, but it does reduce the reach that these videos have and effectively limits the number of people who are able to see the message that you and I are putting out. It's sort of attenuating our signal, something I was speaking with Tiffany Fitzhenry about yesterday. When you talk about things that various people don't want discussed, they have a tendency to try to quiet you down.
Is this thumbs down equivalent to cyber humping, or am I being frivolous?
It's something along those lines, and we're definitely going to talk about that today because it's interesting to note, David, while these social engineers attempt to minimize our credentials and the importance of what we say, they've raised all these subjects that seem to cause you and I to focus in on them more. And the image that we've created for today, David, is illustrating something that we've been talking about quite a bit. You first brought to my attention this concept of Mendenhall's baby, and we'll recall that that was a statement made in the Washington Post in 1979 in an article written by Judith Mann. And we're going to talk some more about the management of the Washington Post, how it's changed, how the Graham family was involved, and the different people who have been editors and owners of the Washington Post over the years. Some of them are pictured in today's collage, along with NFL player Rashard Mendenhall, who famously now dry humped a player on the New York Jets after a successful play, and this resulted in an alarming amount of social media activity on that little relatively inconsequential short segment. Had nothing to do with the outcome of the game. This is a guy who's been a Super Bowl winner, has had an absolutely stellar NFL career despite leaving at a very young age. So I became quite interested in Rashard Mendenhall. I don't really watch football or care very much about the NFL. He seems like a fine guy. He was educated at the University of Illinois, which is sort of interesting. And he's left his career at the Pittsburgh Steelers and later the Arizona, I'm not sure what the name of the team in Arizona is, but he's had a successful but short NFL career, and he went on to be both an actor and a writer on the HBO show Ballers, which is about the lifestyle of successful professional sports players. And it seems like an unusual route for an NFL player to go from player to writer. Usually these guys are becoming commentators or endorsing products and things like that, but it's not unheard of. Mr. Mendenhall started a production company called Nappy Rose Productions. And nappy is a term that I've only ever heard applied to kinky hair along the lines of, the texture of some hair that some black people have. I don't really know the actual definition of it. I think it's one of those words that's kind of like offensive if a white person uses it. So I'm just stating that that's the name of his production company. I think you'll find it interesting, David. I know you've mentioned to us how the current owner of the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, also owns the Internet Movie Database. Now, one thing that I don't know if you were aware of is that the Internet Movie Database, although it's free for everybody to look up movies and find information about actors and directors and writers and producers, there's a professional version of it that requires a subscription called IMDb Pro. And this usually gives much more information about the person. And so here we're looking at Rashard Mendenhall's IMDb Pro page, and it's interesting. When I looked at it the other day, it did have Nappy Rose Productions listed on here. I'm not seeing it immediately right now, but I don't know what to say about that. I did, that's strange. I did look up Nappy Rose Productions when it was on here the other day, and it was located at 212 26th Street in Santa Monica. I couldn't find a phone number for it, David. I found that pretty odd. Have you ever been to Santa Monica, David?
I think I did visit once.
It's a nice part of Los Angeles, definitely. Very high-end neighborhood. There are production companies located there in these various offices and things like that. So I thought it might be interesting just to check out Nappy Rose Productions. It's at 212 26th Street in Santa Monica. And the thing that I found so strange about it, David, is that it's that address, 212, I don't know if you can see it there on the Google Earth, but it's much like our friend Mr. Swigert's addresses. It's located at one of these, UPS stores, post office box rentals. So this is not an office that a production company would be in, and I'm not accusing Mr. Mendenhall of anything untoward, but in Los Angeles they put the address right on the curb. So this is definitely 212 26th Street in Santa Monica, and there is no way, in my opinion, that a successful NFL player who has a production company would put it inside this Brentwood shipping. Now, it's very possible as a celebrity, he doesn't want to publicize his address. He definitely took some heat when he put up a tweet about his doubts relating to Osama bin Laden's involvement in 9/11. I don't think that's particularly strange either. I think a lot of celebrities and athletes got involved in the conversation. But I just think it's strange. Most of the time when people have these production companies, they want to make the contact information accessible to people through that IMDb. What do you think about all this, David?
Well, I think it's an amazing opportunity for someone to decoy away from whatever it was that the Washington Post meant when it referred to this term, Mendenhall's baby. And what intrigues me is the amount of energy that these people on the social networks are putting in dismissing our original discussion, which hasn't really changed very much, about Washington Post Mendenhall's baby, into accusing us of being frivolous or careless or mistaken because the Urban Dictionary term didn't enter the Urban Dictionary apparently until 2011. When right. Mr. Mendenhall was dry humping his colleague. I don't know whether he knew who he was dry humping. Of course, they might have arranged that together in what I think the readers or listeners might be interested to hear about spot fixing. Over to you.
Right. And see, that's the thing. Again, I want to be very clear. We're not accusing Rashard Mendenhall of any wrongdoing, but I have been in touch with his brother. I spoke to his younger brother, and he was a really nice guy. He spoke to me on the phone for a while, said he would ask Rashard if he would appear on the show, because all I want to ask him is what prompted him to do that, to dry hump somebody at the end of a play. And I mean, I don't imagine he was aware of all the social media activity around his dry hump and the fact that now Mendenhalling is essentially a verb that, according to the Urban Dictionary, means to do all that stuff with embarrassing somebody and dry humping them. We can see the dry hump happening right there. We just get a little Mendenhall action. So, I mean, again, there are only 104 views on that video, celebratory hump. There's another version of the video that has 74,000 views. This video was posted on January 23rd, 2011, so it's kind of notable the immediacy of the reaction to this. It almost feels like someone may have prompted these relatively unknown YouTube channels to post this on January 23rd. The 74,000 view one was also posted on that day, and the definitions in the Urban Dictionary went up, I think, on the 24th or the 25th. So it seems like a lot of activity around convincing everybody that this word Mendenhall is definitely related to this video clip. But as you said, David, it does not explain how the word which does not make any sense in the context of this article published on August 8th, 1979. It doesn't make any sense how the word Mendenhall got into this article. And the bigger question now has become not the definition in the Urban Dictionary, but why on March 25th, 2019, did such an obscure reference get changed to Marcy's baby? It was effectively scrubbed from the Washington Post. I've been in direct communication with people at the Washington Post going all the way up to Marty Baron's office. People may not be aware, but Marty Baron is the editor-in-chief of the Washington Post. He's pictured in today's collage right behind Bilderberger Henry Kissinger. And the word from the Washington Post is that they absolutely refuse to change the word Marcy back to Mendenhall, despite being presented with evidence from their own publication that that is exactly what it said in 1979. So the mystery no longer has to do with how Rashard Mendenhall came to choose to hump that guy, although I would like to know the answer to that. Our attention is now directed to what is all this hubbub over the word Mendenhall, right?
Well, absolutely. And I think if we talk generically, not necessarily sexually, although the concept of backdooring, I think, sexually does have certain meaning for certain people. Backdooring in cyberspace means that when you build a system, you leave a backdoor open for enemies or infiltrators or subversion experts to come inside. Let's say they describe themselves as ethical hackers. I think ethical hackers, the language of the back door is, it's common sense, really. You might go in and do a bit of ethical hacking for a client, and because you're not a very good ethical hacker, you might leave a back door open for people with evil intent to come in behind and take over, dare I say it, the United States Navy's Aegis combat systems. Over to you.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to be talking about in greater detail in just about 18 minutes when we transition over to our subscriber exclusive, sponsor exclusive Patreon show that people can view on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I agree, David, that the term Mendenhalling as described in the Urban Dictionary is somehow a distraction from its original appearance there in the Washington Post. But given this really strange reaction from the current administration of the Washington Post, it remains a mystery, and it seems to put even more importance on the presence of it here in this article, and it makes me want to know why it's there, why they refuse to remove it, and what the meaning of it could possibly be. Do you think, David, it's possible that someone could have influenced Rashard Mendenhall and somehow caused him to choose to do that? I'd love to ask him that, but he's said he doesn't want to participate in the show.
Well, I think if the Mendenhall's baby term is a warning that was distributed, let's not guess who might have placed that warning, but perhaps they're talking about a very dangerous organization which, if you exposed explicitly, you'd end up dead.
Right.
If, however, you can plant a steganographic clue in the Washington Post with a distribution like that, that would lead people eventually, maybe later rather than earlier, to investigating the possibility that there are powerful forces within the American government, including military forces, that have been backdoored, if you will, then of course it's a very neat warning, because it rhymes. Let's say Mendenhall's Navy rhymes with Mendenhall's baby, but it perhaps avoids the person or people who planted that message from getting killed. Over to you.
Right. And it's important to also emphasize that despite the fact that that appearance of the word Mendenhall in the Urban Dictionary, which led you to the thought process that Nicholas Soames, must have been the person who Field McConnell was describing in his stories about his sister having Mendenhalled her in 1979, referenced in that article that she was planning to have a baby that August. We've now shown this little graphic representation of the, I believe she's 40 years old, the daughter of Christine Marcy, Jessica Marcy. When juxtaposed against this image of Nicholas Soames, I think it really becomes hard to deny the striking resemblance between these two people. Obviously, this is not definitive proof. This is not a DNA test, but this certainly lends credence to your theory that Nicholas Soames may in fact be the biological father of Jessica Marcy. And I always want to reiterate that we are not exploring this for any purpose other than to understand the geopolitical impact of such an occurrence. We recognize that this is very troubling information for Ms. Marcy to deal with, if true, but we feel it's important that it's explored, and this was brought to our attention by her uncle, the brother of Christine Marcy, your former associate and my former associate, Field McConnell.
Yeah, absolutely. And the geostrategic, I think you used that word, political implications of such a relationship. Well, Nicholas Soames is the grandson of Winston Churchill, obviously not without influence. I think he was the Minister of State for the Armed Forces of the United Kingdom between 1994 and 1997. He is said to have threatened Princess Diana, but moving on, the question is, was he physically in Washington at the time of a, let's say, a Mendenhall conception, potentially? Well, it turns out that in 1978, I think it was in November, if I'm got the dates right, the act of conception would take place for a Mendenhall baby, and he was in Washington, D.C. as personal assistant to Senator Mark Hatfield, the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which my understanding is the most powerful committee in the United States Senate, because it controls, you know, the pork barreling and earmarking of major defense projects. Over to you.
Basically how the money of the United States government gets spent. So yes, that is a very important and strategic committee for someone to try to influence. So we're almost out of time here on our preview broadcast, David, but I think people are starting to get the idea of what we're going to be talking about in just about 15 minutes, a little bit less, over at patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. I always like to remind people, David, that they can also visit your free website, which is reversecsiscripts.com. You've got a handy tab that allows people to access the playlists of all the shows that we've created and put out here on YouTube, including this recent exploration into the Mendenhall mystery. And we're going to continue looking at it. It's interesting to note that as our former British nemesis residing in Poland has fallen by the wayside, a new moron has surfaced and has been emailing you and emailing me, insisting that we should contact Nicholas Soames. I invite him or anyone, he obviously has the guy's email address, email him all these videos and invite him to appear on the show. I haven't said anything about Nicholas Soames that I wouldn't say directly to him, and I'd be very curious to know if he did or did not Mendenhall Christine Marcy in 1978 or 1979.
Particularly in the context of what she would go on to become by 9/11, for example, with control over the Small Business Administration's mentor protege program, where the protege companies appeared to have backdoored their mentors on 911. Over to you.
Absolutely. And we're going to be discussing Mendenhall's Navy when we transition over to Patreon and Subscribestar. So I'll look forward to seeing our viewers there. And David, I'll see you in just a few minutes. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jason. Bye for now.